Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at Catholic Charities of Denver. My name is Kyle Dyer. This is our fourth live online event, and it's a night where you can interact with us, engage with us, and ask questions as we go through the information of this evening. The theme tonight is an important one. It is titled Raising Children in a Chaotic World. There is no doubt that kids today are facing all such sorts of more pressure than any of us faced when we were growing up. There are so many issues at home too that could affect what's going on in a child's life. Maybe the parents are going through a tough time, or there's divorce, or there's illness, or maybe both parents are working a lot to afford their home, so the parents aren't home a lot and the kids are kind of, coming home from school alone, and sometimes maybe there's no dinner and they have to kind of take care of themselves. That's a lot for kids to take and then go to school the next day like everything is going great. So kids sometimes doubt themselves. We all do, right? They may put on this face for their friends. They may set unrealistic goals. And during our discussion tonight, we're going to discuss the pressures facing our children, the depression that can set in when those pressures mount too high. We will also talk about mental illness and also suicide among youth and teenagers. According to the CDC, in 2017, suicide was the leading cause of death in youth in Colorado. I've also heard some numbers where it was number 2 and accidents were number 1, but because of what our kids are going through, they're seeing suicide as a way out, and that is ahead of now accidents as a leading cause of death among children in our state. And it is alarming, it is frightening, and it is leaving so many of us, parents, teachers, peers, with so many questions, like what can we all do to help each other? So this is an important discussion we're having. We are so glad that you're joining us tonight. And again, anytime during this online event, you can submit a question. If you're on the phone, all you do is push *3. And you can submit your question either text, or if you're online on the computer, or also through the phone. We also are going to have a poll question coming up. We invite you to take part in, and we'll give you what that's all about coming up. But first this evening, I would like to introduce everybody to Elias Moe, who is the Superintendent of Catholic Schools with the Archdiocese of Denver. Thank you for coming in this evening.
Yeah, great to be with you, Kyle.
So you started out as a teacher, working with Kids one-on-one, then
That's
a
right.
principal. This year, first job, superintendent.
That's right.
What do you see our kids needing or lacking to live a better life, to feel more secure about themselves?
Sure. You know, our kids are facing so many things today. There's so many pressures, as you described, around them, whether it's through social interactions, through difficulties at home in their home life, family life. And then, we can't also dismiss the fact that the technology that they have and that they're engaged with has also added another dimension that is necessary to continue to address and be cognizant of. So that being said, it's really important that, especially within our Catholic schools, as we talk about our Catholic schools and what our Catholic schools exist for, we really are here to support the formation of mind, body, and soul. But before we can do that, we really have to ensure that we understand what it is that our kids today are facing, what are the obstacles that families today face in the modern world, and in what way then are we as a Catholic school system and as a Catholic church responding to those obstacles that kids face, because they're facing so many things. And I saw that as a teacher and as a principal.
And you have these children for 8 hours a day.
Right.
I mean, parents also have to be very present with their children.
Right.
But the responsibility, also adults who are with them during the school
Absolutely.
day. What are the Catholic schools doing to really let these kids know they're supported?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we have the conviction in our Catholic schools. We share the church's conviction, really, in this, that the parents are the principal and primary educators of their kids. And the domestic church, the family, it really is the unit where growth and formation takes place. So because of that conviction that we have, our schools have an obligation and a responsibility to support families in the formation of their children. And so we take that obligation and that responsibility very seriously. So on our part, the commitment we make to families is we will take care of your babies. Mm-hmm. We will do everything that we can to support their growth and their development on all parameters and in all dimensions, right? Not just the formation of the intellectual capacities and faculties of the child. Mm-hmm. Very important. But the mind and the soul are so prime of place
Right.
for what we do in our schools.
And it's hard to learn if you've got a lot of different things troubling your mind,
Right.
or upsetting you, worrying about
Right.
going out to recess, and maybe there might be a bully out there.
Right.
I know the Archdiocese, the restrictions, no bullying allowed, period. But do kids feel, is there someone that they can talk to at the schools if there is something troubling them, that they feel safe to have somebody to talk to?
Yeah, well, and really, our schools are working really hard to create nurturing, caring environments where the adults in the building are the people they can go to when they have difficulties, when they experience whatever troubles that they may be experiencing in a given moment, whether it's peer interactions, negative peer interactions, or other things that are afflicting them. Our leaders, work hard to build the capacity of their teams, and also to have the supports present in the building so that every child can say they have someone they can go to, whether it's a teacher, whether it's another staff member, or whether it's counselors. Many of our schools count with the tremendous blessing of having counselors on site specifically to deal with issues that children may face related to anxiety or depression or behavior needs that maybe are beyond the capacity of the teachers in the classrooms. But unfortunately, given some of the resources or lack thereof that we have in our schools at times, not all our schools have ready access to counselors.
But that is changing, and we're going to be speaking shortly with one of the psychologists from a group that is working and going into Catholic schools in the Archdiocese, and really meeting a need.
Yeah, absolutely. St. Raphael has been a tremendous blessing for our schools. They're currently in 9 of our schools, and there's other counselors not with St. Raphael's either, but they have been tremendous supports for our children and our schools.
We talk about the peer pressure and all that, but the mental health is definitely an issue facing all different people of all different ages, but with children as well.
Right.
And I mentioned the suicide, and we've had some more suicides. Just a couple weeks ago at my parish, we had a funeral for a young girl who died by suicide. Do you talk about that with the parents and the kids? I mean, how I know it's different ages at the different schools, but talk frankly and openly with the kids about talk with your friends. This is serious stuff. Your life is sacred. Right.
No, absolutely. We can't ignore what's happening outside of our schools or even in the broader world. And the media does a great job of highlighting, unfortunately, the terrible things that are happening, especially suicide nowadays. And our kids are constantly being exposed to the topic, even outside of real situations and things that are happening. The infamous now the hit series 13 Reasons Why. Many of our kids have been exposed to that, and so to a certain extent, they're hearing and they're seeing and being bombarded by the topic. And so really what our schools, I think, have been able to do is, one, to ensure that they're informed and staying on top of what's out there and what's happening. And secondly, disseminating information to families too, to encourage them to have conversations with their children about the topic. And then in the classrooms at a grade appropriate, age level appropriate manner, address the manner, but within the context of the faith too, which I think is really important. I was at St. Stephen's Catholic School in Glenwood Springs a couple weeks ago and had a chance to interact with some of the families there. And I spoke to one dad who's a professor at a local community college there in Glenwood Springs. And they, just a few weeks ago, experienced the suicide of a young man. And he said, we found it so difficult to deal with this issue without talking about faith. We couldn't talk about it within the context of faith, and it felt really empty to speak about this topic of suicide without bringing God in and talking about the importance of faith within this particular theme and topic. And so I think that the great gift and opportunity that our Catholic schools have is to, within the light of faith, enable kids to experience conversations, dialogue, very real conversations and dialogue about this topic that helps them to put things in proper perspective and in right order.
And again, love one another like we want to be loved.
Yeah.
Talk to your friend if they're having a hard time.
Well, and even kids who may be experiencing certain thoughts or feelings or dealing with anxiety. what a tremendous gift that our schools have to be able to tell them, to quote one of my favorite saints, St. John Paul II, to be able to tell them, you are not, this is something that he wrote, you are not the sum of your weaknesses or your failures. You are the sum of the Father's love for you. How tremendous is that opportunity to be able to tell a child who might be experiencing something really difficult and maybe contemplating some serious things. You're loved by God, you're loved by us, and you're in a community that wants to look out for you.
Well, as a parent of the Archdiocese of Denver Catholic Schools, thank you for caring so deeply. To knowing our new superintendent, this is an important topic for you. And thanks for having all the principals and the teachers so open to talk with the kids and for the kids to feel good in the environment they are in. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's we really do see this as our duty to the families that entrust their children to our care, and so it's a tremendous privilege for us.
So nice to see you.
You too, Kyle. Thanks.
Nice. Thank you very much, our superintendent. Thank you so much. I want to, before we get to our next guest, talk about the poll question that I was mentioning earlier at the top of the show. So think about this. When the topic of mental health arises with your children, either at home or if you're a teacher at school, with your own kids at home, do you, one, avoid the topic? You're not really sure what to say. Or number two, talk with your children openly and try to answer any questions as best you can, but have a dialogue. Or number three, do you go online or read articles to try to find out the information, the best things to say? Or number four, do you search your child's social media profiles and try to get a feeling of where they are? You know, you don't want to talk to them openly, you're just going to try to sneak around and see what they're doing. Or perhaps number five, just call up somebody and ask for professional advice. So again, these 5 questions, please join us tonight and answer them. And at the end of this show, we're going to talk about what most of you are feeling. So number 1, do you avoid the topic? You don't know what to say. Do you talk openly with your kids? Do you read articles online? Do you search your child's social media profiles? Or do you go and ask a professional for advice? Again, we'll return to this poll at the end of the next half hour or so. The schools are trying the best they can, as you heard from our superintendent, to make the kids feel supported and secure and make them feel happy. But the reality right now is that there are children who are suffering deeply, and they're sad. And we've all heard about the warning signs in someone's personality to be on the lookout for, but perhaps we all need to dig a little bit deeper, and that's what we're hoping to do tonight, to kind of find out more about what we should be looking for and what we should be doing. So to add this insight, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jim Langley, who's the director of St. Raphael Counseling, which Elias was just talking about. So let's talk about this. What do we all need to do to make our kids, and adults, one another, but the kids especially who are so vulnerable, feel more accepted and feel that they can talk and that there will be no stigma. It's okay to talk about what you're going through.
One of the worst sayings that parents and adults tell kids is that these are the best times of your life, looking back at your high school years, because what's going on for high schoolers most of the time, a lot of the time, is it's the hardest years they've ever experienced in their entire life. So if you're a kid, you need to get good grades. You need to figure out how to fit in. You need to discover what your identity is. You need to just figure out what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. And you've got to become an individual just like everybody else. And so there's this immense pressure, and that there's this message that this is supposed to be just such a wonderful time.
Yeah.
And they need an outlet to be able to talk about it. They need to be heard. They need to be witnessed. When we think about social media, and I'm not anti-social media, but when we think of what it functions as for a lot of kids, it's like a voice crying out in a crowd. They're not talking, they're not necessarily sharing with friends. It's almost as if they're looking for society, for their friends, for their peers, to mirror back their own sense of value, their own sense of self-worth. Mm-hmm. They've got this deep longing, and kids can't meet that need for each other. They need adults in their life to help feel solid and secure and have meaning in their life.
We were talking on the phone last week, and a lot of times kid will be like, oh, you don't understand, Mom. Like, high school was too long ago for us to understand.
Right.
But don't let that mean that you shouldn't, oh, your child doesn't want to talk to you. Your kids want to hear from you. They want to feel supported by you.
No, of course.
As a parent.
Yeah,
even though they may be saying differently.
Of course. It's a kid's job to want to individuate, to become an individual and go out into the world. But that doesn't mean that they want mom and dad to stop caring about them. It's super annoying when you have mom and dad prying into your life and asking you about what's going on. But the only thing worse than having them be interested in your life is having them not be interested in your life. And so it's a parent's duty, I think, to stay involved and to take their complaints about your prying with a grain of salt.
Is there a point though when you do try to have conversations and you might sense something there's a little bit more deeper about your child not wanting to open up? Like, would you feel it? Would you know to talk to? I mean, at what point do you say, I think my child might need some extra help, or might need to talk with the counselor at school, or I need to go to someone like St. Raphael?
One of the biggest complaints that kids have, believe it or not, about parents is when parents themselves are stuck on their phones. When they're attuned to what's going on their own social media or on the news or what have you. And so what our duty as parents, our number one duty, is to put the phone down and to pay attention to our kids and really be in tune with what they're telling us.
Connect with them.
That we need to connect with them, and it's not necessarily going to be through their words. They're not going to sit down and say, Mom and Dad, I'm feeling suicidal. If it gets to that point, it's gone too far. Now, I want to be careful though, because families of suicide also know that you know the warning signs, but that doesn't mean that it was a family's fault that they didn't pick up on it. But as parents, we just need to do the best that we can to be in tune with our kids and listen to the undercurrents of what's going on in their lives, to monitor them. So the two kids at Arapahoe who committed suicide recently, what happened, they both posted on social media before they committed suicide. So parents need to be paying attention to what's going on with their kids' social media. They need to be talking to their kids, and it needs to be positive. So many interactions that parents have with their kids are all about, have you done your chores? Have you done your homework? Why are you late? It's time to do this. Don't do that. So 4 out of 5 interactions are negative, and we need to flip that and make 1 out of 5 interaction being about chores.
We all do that. I'm sure
Oh,
I said those 5 things
guilty
today,
as charged,
right?
for sure.
Right? You mentioned the suicide though, and it is so devastating. Why is that number so big in Colorado? I know
That's such a good
it's a high
question.
number throughout the country, but why in Colorado?
There's a few reasons. So one reason that affects maybe all of society is that suicide can be sort of thought of as a copycat crime. And so kids, they learn through example. That's how their brains are wired. And so they'll see a peer commit suicide. It might be at their school, it might be somewhere else. And they see the outpouring of support and love that happens rightly in these communities. And in their minds, to some degree, they think, oh, maybe this is an answer for me. Because oftentimes what's happening is in a suicide is they're so lonely and they want connection, they want to be noticed, they want to be heard. And suicide is one way for them to get that, so to speak.
It's such a final thing.
Yeah. So, but Colorado in specific, where our numbers are among the worst in the country.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of other possibilities as well. One is that since the legalization of marijuana, suicide has greatly increased. And it's not just a correlation of happening in the last few years. Toxicology reports on kids have shown that there's a higher level of marijuana in these kids' blood than before the legalization of marijuana when they committed suicide. So that's got to be a factor. And then the other factor, and I'm not sure that there's research behind this, but if we think about it, since Columbine, our state has been traumatized. I think we're in a state of post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's so much anxiety and despair that we don't even talk about, that kind of is underneath the surface. And it affects all of our schools. I mean, it's always there, it's always present. And I think as a local society here in Colorado, we haven't recovered from it yet.
And we're hitting the 20th anniversary this spring.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
a lot
so
of
it's
this
even
will be,
more
yeah.
on people's minds.
Okay. I want to take a break because we have Charles who has written in a question.
Awesome.
What are the warning signs for teens? Is it different for teens? And we had a child earlier this year who was in 4th grade at the start of the school year who died by suicide. Are the warning signs for teenagers any different from adults, you think?
A lot of the signs are going to be the same, but they're just going to be expressed in a teenager sort of fashion.
Okay.
So some of the classic signs are an abrupt change in personality or mood. A kid might be one way most of the time, and then fairly suddenly they'll switch and either become more moody and depressed, a very abrupt switch,
Yeah.
but it's important to know it actually can also be the other way around. So sometimes when a teenager or an adult comes to kind of the decision that they want to commit suicide, unfortunately there's like this inner freeing. And so it's actually quite possible that they're in a really great mood.
Yeah.
They're in a wonderful mood. Other signs are, of course, any history of past suicide attempts or self-harm, any family history of severe mental health problems. There's definitely a correlation between acute anxiety and depression and suicide, and so we need to pay attention to that. Also, a subtle sign is when people, adults or kids, they start making things that seem like goodbyes. And you can definitely see that in some of the social media posts that kids do when they have committed suicide. Is they'll make these kind of cryptic, sometimes not so cryptic, posts that are in a way saying goodbye world. They'll text their friends and say goodbye in their own way. And so obviously we need to be paying attention to all those things.
And even if we don't understand it, because the kids do have cryptic, little sayings and stuff that we may not know about. So trying his best to know what's.
I also want to respond though to that question and say, sometimes it's not about the signs.
Oh.
Because if you families who are victims of suicide, they'll look back and they'll feel this intense guilt, and a lot of them will say, we didn't see it. We actually didn't see it coming. And so there's signs, and we need to pay attention to the signs when we see them. But really, the main thing is really tuning into what's going on in our family, in our child's life, and having a real relationship with them. We can't prevent suicide on our own. A person who makes that decision, to some degree, they make that decision. And so we can't lay guilt on them, on the families who are victims of them. We can just do our part to be that loving support for them.
And we have to be. We have to be for for our families who are going through this pain. Thanks, Charles. Again, anytime you have a question, just push *3, and you can just type it in, or we have a caller, right? Mark is joining us right now. Mark, do you have a question for Dr. Langley? It's Mark.
Thank you so much for covering this very difficult topic tonight. I am a parent of 2 teenage girls, and so just normal conversations, sometimes, just depending on situations, can be troubling. What's an easy or a safe way, I guess, to bring up the topic of suicide and have an open conversation? Do you have any tips on something like that?
Great question, Mark.
Really good.
It's a very astute question. Sometimes as parents we're afraid to bring up a topic like suicide because we're afraid of planting the idea in our kids' heads. It's like maybe our kid has never ever thought about it, but if they're going through a tough time and we give them the idea, then they'll start thinking about it. And that's a complete myth. Almost every kid, on down to a very young age, knows what suicide is. And so talking about it actually is going to be a very freeing experience. And we need to just take it on in a very direct, head-on kind of way. And it's actually very low risk that you're going to do anything damaging in that kind of conversation. You just need to talk about it. And you don't want to bring it up in a defensive kind of way or anything like that. Maybe take your kids out for ice cream or dinner and just have it in a low pressure, almost casual kind of way, but in a serious way as well, where it just opens up the dialogue, that it's something that you can talk about.
And didn't you like how Superintendent Mo was saying, bring back in your faith and use that also, like, God loves you and all the stuff you're going through, He is working with you, our faith can help with this in these conversations. They're such hard conversations, and we have to assure them that they're loved, the kids. Right?
If suicide is anything, it's a disorder of a lack of hope and a lack of sense of love. And our world, our secular world, does not have an answer for that. And so God, Jesus Christ, is really, truly the only solid, true answer. And we need to bring that into our families' lives. We, as parents, pass on God's love to our children so that they can get a sense of what it's like to be loved by the Father. I think it's absolutely essential, and as kind of awkward as it might sound, it's important for us to teach our kids to have their own relationship with God so that they can take their struggles to Him and so that they can get that sense of love and to feel noticed by the Lord. It's incredibly powerful, and it's absolutely necessary, I think.
But definitely have the conversation, even with the young ones, because they're hearing it, and when they have access to iPads, they can Google things, and wouldn't you rather the information come from a trusted parent?
That's exactly right.
Than what they're going to find on the internet, right?
That's exactly right.
We have another question. Oh, this is kind of on the same vein. Jeanette wants to know, how does faith factor in? Continuously telling people that they love them. And I think the Archdiocese bringing counselors, some schools do have counselors already on board, but the schools who couldn't have them, St. Raphael is coming in. So you are providing a sounding board for these kids.
That's exactly right.
And when you come into the schools, do you incorporate faith into what you're talking with the kids about?
So most of the parents of the Archdiocese, they take their kids to Catholic schools, not just for good education, but for faith formation too. Bringing God into your school community is just an incredibly powerful thing. And my kids are in a Catholic school, and that's the main attractor for me. And so when we bring our counselors in, it's from a faith-based perspective. And so the kids have one other voice in their life at the school who is reinforcing that message that hopefully they're getting from their parents, from their teachers, and from other adults in their life. It's just one more voice. That's this voice that is with no strings attached.
Okay.
That is reinforcing hopefully just that same message of love and unconditional support.
Let's talk about what you're doing for the schools that might not have had a counselor on staff. Someone on your team comes in one day a week, or how does this work with the 9 schools that you're in the Archdiocese?
So typically the way that it works is a counselor will come in for a day of service a week.
Okay.
A couple of our schools have 2 or 2.5 days of service a week as well. And they'll come in and they're open to meet with kids. They'll also work with the teachers on classroom management, behavior management, helping provide emotional supports for kids, and also collaborating with families on how to support them across the whole spectrum of their lives, from home and social life to school.
And do the concerns of the kids vary from school to school? Is there a trend of what you all
That's
talk
such a good
about?
question. I think it can vary from school to school. In some schools, socioeconomic status is more of an issue that comes up. In other schools, there's an immense academic pressure that kids need to deal with. Other schools, one of the things that I'm so proud of being connected with the larger network of Catholic schools is some of the parents who take their kids to Catholic schools are making incredible sacrifices. They're working multiple jobs to pay for their kids to go to this school. And because of it, sometimes family resources in these families are more limited. And so sometimes the reality is that these kids have more to worry about than just getting good grades. They've got a lot of bigger things on their mind. And so our counselors just help them deal with all the stressors in their life, not that they can go beyond school as well.
And do you work with the parents too, or do the kids just come in, like take a break out of a class, or how does that work?
It totally depends.
Okay.
Yep. Sometimes the primary thing is kids meeting initially with the school counselor, but of course they get permission from the parents. And but then it typically grows into some collaboration with the family as well. You can kind of think of it like this. I think of counseling as you're taking a little fish and you're taking them out of a dirty fish tank, and as a counselor you're kind of scrubbing them off.
Okay.
And you can scrub them off once a week. Figure out how to help clean out their fish tank.
Okay.
And that dirty fish tank can be at school, helping provide a better environment for them at school, and then also
What's it like for you when you see some of the kids you work with who are getting stronger? And
it's so fulfilling. It's an incredible experience. And in fact, just yesterday, I was meeting with a boy who came to me loved, and this poor boy has really intense ADHD, and he can't sit still, and he's got some kind of intense emotional problems. And he sat down and he said, "Dr. Jimmy, I can't believe it. I'm let back into the group, and they didn't kick me out. And I stayed the whole 3 hours, and I got to have pizza." It's amazing. And just seeing their sense of dignity get restored is one of the most fulfilling parts of the whole job.
So once we start listening and helping these kids to feel stronger for themselves, they can turn things around. There is hope restored.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in healthy families and healthy schools provide this amazing framework for kids to work with and to grow in. And kids, they are resilient and they want to grow and they want to succeed. And so when we give them that avenue, it's amazing what they can accomplish.
Dr. Jim, Marianne has written in. Thanks, Marianne. She says, what do you do if you see one of the signs that you were talking about earlier for suicide or depression, or if you see, your child's friend, maybe acting out and that's not like them? If it's not your child, I guess it'd be different. But what can we do as a parent,
Right.
as a grandparent? What should we be doing for our kids who are struggling?
Our first emotional reaction to this kind of thing a lot of times is almost like, oh, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to raise a fuss. But that's exactly what we need to do. It's
Okay.
so much better to raise a fuss and to have it be kind of awkward than it would be to ignore something that's a real sign. And if you are the person witnessing a real sign, there's a good chance it's not the first sign that's come out. And so somebody needs to be the one who comes forward and does something about it. And what you do about it can take all kinds of forms.
Okay.
If it's your kid, well, you probably should talk to your kid.
Yeah.
If it's really a real scary sign, you need to take them to the emergency room. If it's a less scary sign, you need to call and get your kid some counseling. If it's not your kid, there's a whole bunch of things that you can still do even though you might feel like you have less power.
Okay.
I think it's important to do your best to reach out to the family of that child.
Okay.
You need to talk to the school of that child. And you also can call the police and have a well check done on that child. And it seems like such a big leap and such an awkward thing to do. But oftentimes that's exactly what needs to happen.
Right.
Is a sign. You can think of it as kind of like a symptom that's demanding attention. So, if we have a cold or if we have the flu, our bodies are telling us that we need a nap, and so we take naps, and that's what helps us get better. And these kids with these signs, they're asking for help, and so we need to give them that help.
Yeah, you were saying, call a parent if you see something in someone's child. A lot of adults might feel nervous about doing that about someone else's child, or it's difficult. Like we said, one of the first poll questions is I avoid it. I don't know what to say. I don't want to offend. I don't want to assume. As adults, do we just need to get over that?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Okay.
Think about it. If it's your kid, what would you want another adult to do? You'd want to know.
It might hurt.
It might hurt. It might be really awkward, but you'd always want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we need to be that community. So there's a saying that that we need to raise kids in, it takes a village, right?
Yes, it does.
And it takes a village to notice what's going on with a kid.
And if my child was having a difficult time and I wanted to talk to my friend Jimmy, you know, again, it might be hard. We don't know what to say. Maybe we don't say anything. We just listen. I mean, as adults, we need to be really, and kids too. But we know how to be empathetic.
That's exactly right.
We know what empathy means. It
Yeah.
may not come to us naturally, but gosh, we gotta try. We gotta work together in this village.
Yeah. Something that's really important for people to keep in mind too is that the way that our society is currently working, and I think this problems with suicide and even social media are a symptom of this, is we're sort of expecting kids in some ways to kind of raise themselves. So it's peers raising peers. Peers are the primary support system for kids. But the reality is that's the blind leading the blind. Kids can't mediate. They can support each other,
Okay.
but they don't really know what to do. And so it takes adults, hopefully primarily parents, but secondarily other adults in a kid's life to be that safe place that someone can go. And actually, there's a lot of power in not being a parent and being involved in a kid's life, whether it's a friend, you're the parent of a friend, or your coach or something like that, because you're one step away from the parent, and so it feels a little bit safer sometimes.
And it makes the parent of the child who's struggling feel good to know that there are people out there who kind of have their back and they can go to, you know, and talk to and be listened to.
I think that's exactly what we're looking for
Yeah.
with our kids in Catholic schools.
You have a term called authentic connectedness. I
Yeah.
like that term because truly listening to one another is what we all need.
Yeah. So it takes, parents are the only people initially who can provide that intense and a connected bond that helps you feel secure about who you are. A good parental bond is like this safe base from which a kid can kind of go off and explore their sense of identity. So the stronger the family, actually the more independent a kid will ultimately grow into being. So what's important here is you reflect a child's self-worth as a parent. It's almost like mirroring God's love to the child.
Okay.
You make them feel, by being connected, you make them feel safe, like you've got this, that they're a safe trampoline on which they can fall should things fail. And this is something that kids can't really do for each other. You have to get it from an adult. And they can learn how to do it, and they certainly can be good friends and support each other. But we really can only learn that by being connected with an adult.
Okay. Again, anytime that you all have questions, just do *3 for Jim. You all do go, and people have asked, would you go and speak to my school or my parish about what we're talking about tonight? You're game for that.
One of the biggest parts of our mission with St. Raphael Counseling is outreach.
Good. Okay.
We don't want to just sit with people in the counseling room. That's obviously a really good thing for us to do. But we believe that we're gifted with so much wonderful information
you are.
by combining the wonderful teachings of the church with the awesome science of psychology. And that gives us a unique message and a unique mission. And we want to pass that on to as many people as we can. And we've got 20 different clinicians with 20 different specialties, and we can talk about all kinds of things for people.
So I have a phone number for you, 720-377-1359 is the phone number for St. Raphael's Counseling. I think it would be a great thing for schools to have people come in and talk about how to accept maybe kids with differences and how to be understanding, how to be supportive and help them feel, I think it would be a great thing. I think that'd be a great, great thing. And is the goal eventually to get into more archdiocesan schools for you all? Yes.
That's the goal.
That's the $1 million question, right?
Schools are wanting more counselors, not less counselors.
Really?
And so that's a need we're really excited to try and meet over the next few years, is to get into as many of them as we can and provide just as much support to kids as we can.
This is a great partnership you have with Catholic Charities because, a lot of schools don't have them because of the cost. It is an expensive addition beyond the regular reading, writing, arithmetic, to have a counselor on staff full-time is a lot, and even part-time.
It's really expensive. So it costs, with salary and other support costs, it costs about $65,000 a year to have a counselor in a school full-time.
Wow.
And most schools just
No.
can't afford to pay that. And so we have bent over backwards. We're striving to do everything we can to be able to kind of plug that hole and to provide that need to people. And so I do kind of want to make a shameless self-promotion.
Go ahead.
So our mission, we are so passionate about what we do. And we have an ambitious mission to provide Catholic psychology, not just in the schools, but to people across the Archdiocese and to people who maybe can pay for it and also to people who can't pay for it.
Good.
We do speaking and we work directly with the church and we work with priests and we do psychological evaluations, and it costs a lot of money. And we do want to ask for support.
Okay.
And so for those listeners out there who are maybe open to considering and discerning the possibility, they can go to ccdenver.org/support St. Raphael.
Okay.
And so St. Raphael is STRAPHAEL.
Got it.
So
a lot of people, especially with the end of the year coming, are thinking, where can I support? And if you think about the kids and what the kids are going through, and like you say, these peer pressures, mental illness, it affects all kids no matter what part of town you're from. And some schools can afford it and some schools just can't. So the fact that you're going into these schools, inner city, suburban, and helping kids is just incredible. We do have a caller named Mike who says, do you have a website for kids to go to? Do you have resources on your website or is it mostly for parental driven?
it's mainly,
Okay.
it's mainly parental driven. I actually don't know of any resources off the
giving you
top
some
of my
homework.
head. There is a suicide hotline, and I don't have that number memorized.
I do. It's
Well, look at you, Kyle.
1-844-493-TALK, and that's for anyone,
good.
kids or adults. Or is that that's the color crisis line? Is there something just for children too?
I think that line is mainly for children. A lot of
Okay.
schools and school districts too also have like safe to tell
Of course.
phone lines that they can call.
I know at my daughter's schools they do safe to tell
Yeah.
and talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just talk. This has been, we still have another question coming in. Will you have services? I can't even read that. In northern Colorado. Because the Archdiocese does go up into northern Colorado and Greeley.
Such a good question. So we do have an office. We have some offices up north. Our most northern office right now is in Fort Collins.
Okay.
So we do have a counselor up there
Okay.
who does
One.
work. One, shout out to Grace. She's an awesome therapist.
Okay.
Everyone should go see her.
Okay.
Another thing that we're doing is we're expanding to the Eastern Plains as well,
Okay.
which is in desperate need of some support also. So for the most part, we cover a good 75% of the whole geographic.
Oh, good. Yeah, you said you were just on the Western
Archdiocese.
Plains, right? You were just in Grand Junction. Is that what you were saying earlier, or you were saying? Okay, yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yet.
ccdenver.org/support St. Raphael. We'll get there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Maria says, what does the church teach about suicide?
Imagine the despair you would have to be experiencing to think that killing yourself is the only escape. If that's the case, I think their free will is kind of overridden to some degree. And also, there's a lot of people who commit suicide have severe mental health problems, underlying mental health problems that have never been identified. The other popular cause lately, especially with physician-assisted suicide, is people are in really, really severe pain, and so having some of these thoughts, it's maybe not even sinful. So Saint Therese, even when she was suffering, she said that it's a good thing that the bottle of medicine was not kept on her nightstand, because she would have been tempted to drink it to kill herself. And so if Saint Therese, who's one of the greatest saints we have in our church, can experience those thoughts, then I'm just not convinced that most people who commit suicide are guilty of.
Because we're human, right?
Because we're
and if
human.
you're suffering, and the priest at our parish, at the funeral I went to a couple weeks ago, he's like, God gave this young lady all the good and the bad. He made her just the way he wanted her to. And, he's calling her back to him. And I think I thought it was very comforting where he's talking about mental illness. And it wasn't what she wanted, but she loved her friends, and he was assuring to the children in the audience that she loved you, and she, loved you and loved what you gave back to her. But there was this thing, this suffering in her that really became unbearable.
And particularly in kids and teenagers, even in young adults, their brains literally are not fully developed. So I know we say that kids reach the age of reason by 7 or so years old. Their frontal cortex that's in charge of making good decisions hasn't come fully online yet.
When does that happen?
At about age 25.
25.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot we're asking of our kids to think like an adult. They can't.
They're incapable of it. They act like little adults, and we
Right.
want to help them become adults, but they're not adults yet.
So suffering when you're an adult and you're having these thoughts, or suffering when you're a child, it's almost a whole different story, because they can't reason. They really can't reason.
I mean, I would challenge the listeners to think back to maybe difficult times they had in high school.
Yeah.
You can't see beyond graduation because you've been in school your whole life. Imagine if you went to a job every single day for your entire life that made you feel miserable, and coming home was full of suffering. You would think that's all there is. And so many of the teens that do decide to commit suicide, they just can't see beyond. They can't see into their future yet. And it's partly because their brains haven't developed.
Interesting. Maria, thank you. That was a tough question. You probably weren't prepared for that. Is there anything that we have not talked about that we should mention to our listeners this evening?
I really want to reiterate that just talking to your kids about suicide and monitoring their social media and that kind of thing, it's mental health first aid, and it's important.
Okay.
But we want to do more than that. We want to have joyful family cultures. If you have a really deeply joyful family culture, I'm not sure that 100% eliminates the possibility that a kid will commit suicide, but gosh, it sure has to go a long way. And so I would challenge parents to think about what are the values they want to exemplify in the home. How are they concretely bringing the love of God into the home? How much are they actually practicing their faith, not just attending church, but really being God, Jesus, for one another in family life? So if families do those things, and if we do that more together as a society, I think that as time goes on, this whole suicide thing is going to become less of a topic, God willing.
Yeah, I hope so. I definitely hope so. Because I think a lot of people in our community right now are hurting, and we need to turn that around, show them love, and
That's
really
right.
boost up these kids.
That's
and
exactly
have
right.
joyful family experiences.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And there might be challenges that make it, not every day is joyful, right? Not every day.
God does not
And we
promise
shouldn't
that it's going to be
and-
easy.
And we shouldn't try to make every day joyful, because that'll be difficult too. That'll add another stress, so we don't want that. But as best as you can, get the family together and talk about the tough things. But like you say, the mental health first aid is just talking about it and not having all the other experiences that make the kid fulfilled.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, Jim Langley,
Thank
so
you,
much.
Kyle.
I'm going to give these poll results, and I kind of want your
great.
your reaction. So we asked at the top of the show, when the topic of mental health comes up with your kids, do you, 1, avoid the topic, 2, talk with them as best as you can, number 3, search online for information so you kind of know what to say, which is another whole world, right? Or do you, 4, check their social media and try to figure out what's going on with them without talking with
Wonder
them?
what the results are.
Okay, one more thing though. 5 was call someone like you. The number 1 I am so proud of everybody was talking with your kids.
That's the correct answer.
That is so great, though, but people don't know what to say. And in fact, the people are trying is a great thing. Number 2, by the way, was search online for information, and 3 was avoid the topic.
Well, it feels incredibly awkward. I don't blame parents for having that kind of impulse to try and avoid it. I think it's an incredibly thing, and we just need to get over it.
Yeah,
The same
yeah.
thing. At some point, we need to give our kids the birds and the bees talk. It
I
just
know.
is something that has
I
to
know,
happen.
right?
We need to talk to our kids about their mental health,
And they'll appreciate it.
and it's going to be okay.
To hear it from you and not from someone on the playground or searching online. Number 4 was people will call a professional, and nobody admitted or responded to stalking their child's social media sites for information. So that's probably healthy. Talking with your kids one-on-one is the most important thing. And like you said, they want to see us put the phones down too. So everyone put the phones down and just have a conversation.
That's right.
Yeah, very good. All right. Thank you, Jim Langley.
Thank you, Kyle.
Again, I should mention the phone number if you want further conversations with him or for him to come, or one of his teammate members to come to your school or your parish. 720-377-1359. Thank you very, very much. And thank you all. We're going to continue this discussion at Catholic Charities in the weeks and months to come. There is an event this weekend at St. Thomas More, the annual Gospel of Life conference, and that's where they're talking about issues that make things difficult when we're trying to live our joyful family lives. So that's at St. Thomas More. There's more information on the Catholic Charities website. Also, we're continuing a conversation, actually 2 conversations in November regarding suicide, and that's going to be on Respect Life Radio again in November. We will post the exact dates when they're airing, but look for that because this is an important conversation. To hear more people talking about it, we'll learn things like I've learned so much from you tonight, but just in talking with and hearing other people's stories, that will help. Also, I want to mention at the very end of the Denver ballot, in a couple of weeks from now on Election Day, you're going to see an initiative that's calling for an expansion of mental health and addiction services in our city. The initiative is called Caring for Denver, and the goal is to raise, through sales taxes, $45 million so that there are counselors in schools within the city, from preschool up into some of the college campuses in the city of Denver. Because we know kids, teenagers, college age are facing stresses, facing mental health issues. And a lot of times when there's stress, we self-medicate. So we know, we've heard the news stories about the rise in self-medicating and addiction. So this would be also fund addiction services, and there'd be more of them. So that, they say Caring for Denver, it's the bottom of the ballot, but probably the top priority. And for families in Denver, and as a mother, I think that's a pretty good way to put it. Most immediately, though, if someone you know is experiencing a mental health, substance abuse, or emotional crisis tonight, you can call the number I mentioned earlier, 1-844-493-TALK. That's 1-844-493-8255. There is somebody there who will listen to you. So perhaps you're watching tonight, call that number if you need someone to talk to listen to you. Again, thank you for joining us for Raising a Child in a Chaotic World. Hopefully we've given you some good insight and some good tools and some direction, and I bet there'll be a lot of conversations around the dinner table of the next week or so. But just talk with your kids about what they're facing, what they're hearing at school, how they're feeling about life right now. And maybe don't say, this is the best time of your life, high school is, because it's not for everybody. Our next program is going to fall the week of Thanksgiving, so that would be Tuesday, November 20th. And on that night, we're talking still about supporting families, the Adopt a Family program that the Catholic Charities has every year. This might be something that your family wants to do over the holiday season, or maybe co-workers of you adopt a family in somewhere within the Archdiocese of Denver and really show them that there are people out there who are supporting and rooting for them. Again, that's November 20th. Tell your friends they can register to listen, engage, and be inspired like you were tonight. Always ccdenver.org/engage is where you will find us. Thank you for listening. I'm so glad that so many people listened and learned tonight and engaged with us. Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye.